on and I put on my video as well.
There you go.
On and I put on my video as well.
There you go. So let me hand over to a good friend. Well, he used to be a good friend before we started doing this. And colleague,
Cheers,
Russell.
Sean. Yeah, good to see you again online, and thanks for all your help in the last couple of days getting everything sorted out. I was in Sean's bad books yesterday because I left it to the last minute to send in the presentation. I'd been out in Crete enjoying the weather out there, and I hadn't had time to do the presentation, but it all went well, and I'm hoping it's all going to go well again. Lovely to see so many people online. I can see about 115, 116 people online at the moment, and I was reading the chat window and I could see that you were from all over the world. Absolutely incredible. Hopefully some of you have come because of teachertrainingvideos.com, because I did send a notification to all the people that follow my website to let them know that I was presenting. So hopefully there's a few of you that follow me on teachertrainingvideos.com. I'm going to talk about blended learning. And I'm going to try my best to really give you a bit of theory and some practice. So talk a little bit about the reality of blended learning, and also give you a couple of tools that you could use, nice easy tools as well, that you could use if you wanted to start to blend your classes. Just before I start, just really quickly, and first of all, before I start as well, I want to just say a big thank you to Oxford University Press for inviting me to do these presentations. It's really, really kind of them, and it's been a lot of fun, and I've really enjoyed it. I'm a founder of teachertrainingvideos.com. That's a website that gives free help to teachers that would like to introduce technology into their teaching and learning. So if you wanted to learn to blog, or you wanted to learn to do a podcast, or you wanted to learn to deliver a webinar like this, or you wanted to learn to make a screencast, you can go to my website and you can just click on any videos that you want to watch, and you'll see me and hear me showing you how to use that technology. It's very popular. And it's actually getting more and more popular. Recently the numbers have started to really grow, which is very exciting for me, and I think that reflects the fact that now so many people are interested in technology. My other job is, apart from being the founder of Teacher Training Videos, is that I work for the Nile Institute for Language Education, and I am what we call a Learning Associate Trainer for them as well. And I also write in 3 journals. That is the English Teaching Professional, Anglo Files, and the Teacher Trainer as well. So that's a little bit about me. Let's get straight on to the actual presentation, blended learning. The key thing to remember about blended learning is that really it's about the way that we combine together the face-to-face and the digital. A lot of courses kind of develop from a face-to-face course where we begin to add bits of technology, and those courses in a way are not built on really looking at the maximum combination of the digital and the face-to-face part. Essentially, a good blended learning course will mean that the sum, the total of all the little bits, that is the face-to-face bits and the technological bits, the total, it will be greater than the individual bits. So the key to a good blended learning course is about the way that the 2 elements, that is the digital and the face-to-face, combine. And I'll be talking about this point at several stages through the presentation. That relationship is the key thing. We can all make courses where we teach face-to-face and then we suggest to the students that they watch extra material online, or they watch a video, or they go to a link, or they do an activity. But if it's not integrated, if it's not a tight relationship between what you're teaching and what you're using digital for, then for me it's not really blended. And that is the essence, and it's not an easy thing to achieve. It's a very, very difficult thing to achieve, and it's something that slowly we are beginning to understand more and more about. How do you use blended learning effectively? Now, there are loads and loads of blend modes, I call them, and I want to talk a little bit about them because some of these are beginning to emerge a lot, and many of them I've worked on. In other words, producing blended learning courses of different types. For example, a lot of the time now, for example, in universities or in many institutions now, we have this kind of what I call block mode blend. That is where, for some periods of time, the students are studying at home. So it might be, say, for 2 months that they're studying at home. And then for 2 months, they go into class. So in that way, you've got a kind of whole part of the course that's done online at home, and then of course you've got 2 weeks or 2 months where you're in a face-to-face environment. So these block mode type courses are becoming very common. For example, the University of Warwick, where I used to teach, they run a block mode course which is for business studies. And the students spend 9 months of the year studying online, and then just 3 months of the year in the summertime at the university studying face-to-face. So that would be one example. Another very common block mode is in colleges, where you get students who might be, say, doing 2 weeks in college, 2 weeks online, 2 weeks in college, 2 weeks online. So they're kind of moving between the two environment. So that would be another block mode that you see. Sometimes the block mode might include a pre-course that's online. You sometimes get this on English for Academic Purposes, on courses in preparation for the IELTS, where the students study online in preparation for arriving in England or Australia or Canada or wherever, and then doing a face-to-face course. So we don't always have to think about blended as being in the class and sort of out of the class. It can actually be whole blocks of learning that are taking place in a blended learning mode. What we probably know best as blended learning is a kind of class blend. And that is where we are often teaching in the class in a face-to-face environment and then sharing content we want the students to access at home. Now, these are in a way the most kind of well, let's say this is the most common way that most ELT courses are blended, and it's also the way that in certain instances can create the most problems, because one of the things that comes out of this, and you'll certainly read about it when you read the book that I suggest looking at, is that because we're already teaching face-to-face, we begin to share more and more content online. We don't combine it well enough, and the course gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so there's a real danger with a class blend, because it's almost something that's organic, that develops, that very quickly the course becomes too big because it's not really planned. It evolves. So class blends are what most of us have probably done, not all of us of course, but most of us have done some type of class blend, and that is where some of the problems can emerge, and we'll come back to this point a bit later. Now, another type of blend, and this is where I think that we can start to see the way that people are thinking about blended learning more, is what I call, or what we call, the flipped classroom. Now, I've been involved in a lot of work in the flipped classroom, and indeed on my website there are some interesting lectures about the flipped classroom, and I'm just about to put up an interview with someone who's done some flipped classes, Eddie Moran at the University of Stirling. The flipped classroom is really thinking about a blended model, but in a special way, in terms of what we call the lower and order thinking skills. Now let me give you an example. If you think about university, in a university often we teach the basic concepts in the class with the students. So we might be teaching them history, or we might be teaching them Spanish, or we might be teaching them geography. We often teach the basic concepts of that particular subject in the class to the students. They listen, they take notes. The students then go away and do the homework, whether it's writing an essay or doing an exercise or doing a recording. So in a way, we are with the students as teachers when they're doing the lower order thinking skills. They're trying to understand the concept, we're explaining it to them. But then they go home, and it's at home when they do the coursework that they start to do what we call the higher order thinking skills. Now, people like Aaron Sams, Jonathan Bergman, and other people, Brian Talbot, and people that I've met, began to say, well, this is not a good idea. Can't we flip this? Can't we get the students to do the lower order thinking skills on their own at home, and then come into the class, and in the classroom we can spend more time on the higher order thinking skills? So we flip the learning so that the teacher is with the students when they're doing the higher order thinking skills. So let's put that into give a real example. Imagine I'm going to teach you how to write a discursive essay. Instead of me talking about a discursive essay in the class, perhaps I make a video and I share that video with you, and in that video I talk about discursive essays and how they should be organized, and perhaps I give you a couple of questions to think about. You do that at home. Then you come into the class and we begin to work with your ideas. So perhaps, for example, in the class, I give you some essays, and I ask you, well, which one do you think is best? Which one is organized best, and why? Or perhaps I give you some different paragraphs and say to you, can you organize these into a discursive essay? Perhaps I give you the beginning of a discursive essay and the end, and I ask you to write the part in the middle. So what I'm trying to do now is to apply and analyze and evaluate and create. I'm doing exercises that are what we call higher order thinking skills. So it's a blended class. Technology at home, students watch videos, they learn the basic concepts. They come into the class and we interact with the students doing tasks and group work where we practice the higher order thinking skills. So now, student is on their own, lower order thinking. Student is with the teacher, higher order thinking. Now some of you are probably saying to yourself, yeah, but Russell, I don't teach like that. I don't stand at the front of my class and teach the lower order thinking skills. And that is very true. In ELT, we already flip our classes a bit. We already reduce the amount of time that we're teaching in the class. We tend to spend more time getting students to work in groups and pairs, etc. So I'm not saying that the flipped classroom is really relevant to ELT all the time, but there might be certain moments when it works. I'll give you an example. Let's imagine that I was going to prepare you for the PET oral examination from Cambridge exams. I could give you a video to watch at home where you go through the different parts of the PET exam, and perhaps I get you to think about the order of the exam, think about the types of questions that you might be asked or the types of tasks you might be asked to do in the exam. So you've prepared a basic understanding of the PET exam by watching a video at home. Then in the class, we start to do activities. Maybe we even reenact the examination. We put the students into groups. One of them is the interlocutor, the examiner, and the other two students act as if they're doing the exam. So we move from the understanding, remembering at the lower order and shift up to the applying, analyzing, evaluating, creating. So my point is that the flipped classroom could be relevant to certain aspects of ELT, particularly in English for academic purposes, particularly in certain areas. And I've certainly used it in my tests that I've done with students when I was at Warwick University, looking at this idea of kind of flipping some of the classes. Not all of them, of course. So the flipped classroom definitely has a place to play within ELT in certain points, and it's quite an interesting form of blended learning. And perhaps it's a form of blended learning that begins to now take the theory on a little bit more and think about how we are going to maximize the effectiveness of all of the different technologies and tools that we've got available to us. And that's really what we're trying to do when we're blending a class and making the learning as effective as possible. So if we're talking about the reality of blended learning, I think we need to just go through a few things. Firstly, my first point, many blends grew out of previous courses. And that means the course was never really organized to be a blended course. Rather, and this definitely happened to me, rather I began to add stuff to my course. Oh, you can watch this link. Oh, you can watch this video. Oh, you can do this exercise at home. You can do this reading. But it wasn't very planned. because I didn't begin the course from zero. I already had a face-to-face course and I began to add to it. Now the problem with that is how the two parts integrate and combine together. And it's much more difficult when you already have a course for that to be successful. And secondly, what often happens, and you'll certainly come across this in the book that I'm going to recommend to you, is that the courses very quickly become too big. Not long ago, I was invited to a fantastic presentation at the university, Queen's University, and I remember the presenter saying, okay, open up your blended learning courses and look at them with your partner and ask yourself, could you really do everything that's in the course? And most of us had to admit that our courses had become too big, and that was partly the problem because they weren't planned. Now more and more courses are being planned. In other words, we're thinking much more about how they integrate and link together, and that is very, very important. The key point I want to make then is that a blended learning course, you need to think about the overall course, the overall objectives of that course, and how you organize it. Blended learning courses need to be really well organized. And what often happens is that we have a link here and a blog here and an article there, and we've not all organized it into one place, and we don't understand it as one whole. And that is where a lot of the problems have emerged for me in the past, definitely. I've started to get a lot better now at organizing my blended learning courses and thinking about this whole and the size of the course, but it's taken me a long time to learn, and I probably started blending as early as 2001, 2002. Now, before I move on to start to talk a little bit about the technologies, I just want to sort of go through a couple of things that I think are really important and very relevant at the moment. The first one is that digital is the reality of our world. Why should we blend our courses? If we was to ask that question, probably the most important thing is that first point, or the first 2 points. We're living in a world now where there is more and more use of technology. For example, I was writing a report this morning about the use of technology in secondary schools in the UK, and saying that, because some people were saying to me, oh, one of the problems is the students can't type. Well, actually, that is the problem is being created because we're not using technology enough with them in that context, for example. They're going to be expected to be able to type and use and input information at heart when they go into a job situation, but we're not actually training them to do that enough in school. Perhaps we even need to provide them with keyboard skills. The reality is that lots of jobs, and many more jobs, will involve technology. And I'm currently reading a book, Susskind and Susskind, and a couple of other things from someone called Tony Wagner, and I'm going to write his name in the window here. You can find some great stuff from Tony Wagner on YouTube. Just put his name into YouTube. A lot of people are talking about this disjoint between the way that we are teaching and the skill sets that we're helping our students to develop, and the skill sets that they're going to need in business. And I think that there is a bit of a difference, and we need to think more about this. Another key thing is autonomy. We know that students in the future will need to carry on learning more and more when they go to work. So whereas in the past my dad was a company rep for a company, he did the same job for most of his life as a salesman in the daytime and playing the piano in the evening times, and that was it. He didn't have to keep reskilling and learning new skills. But nowadays people do have to keep reskilling all the time. So it's kind of important that we teach people, we help people to become more autonomous as learners. And one thing about blended learning, and the flipped classroom is a really nice example, is that we begin to get the students to take a little bit more responsibility for their own learning, learning to use video effectively, learning to search for material on the internet, learning to skim and scan, learning to understand the sources of the material that they come across. So it's really important. However, we've also got to be careful that we don't overload students, and that's why we need to always keep a clear idea of the total, the complete course. Because if we all start blending our courses, the students are going to have no time for anything else but studying. So we have to play that balance very, very carefully. We've already mentioned teacher time, so perhaps if we get the students to do the lower order thinking skills at home, and then spend more time doing the higher order thinking skills with the teacher in the class. So better use of class time. Some people believe it saves time, it saves money, saves money. And I'm really not sure about that. Blended learning courses initially can be quite expensive to set up, especially the block mode ones, but perhaps over a longer period they can be. They can save money. They can certainly make better use of space. For example, I was talking about colleges. You could have an English class and a French class going on at the same time. For 2 weeks, the students are at home studying the English class. The French students are in class. After 2 weeks, the French students go home and study online. The English students come into the school and study face-to-face. So you can almost be running 2 courses at the same time. When some group of students are at home, the other ones are working online, are working in the class, and vice versa. And you see this a lot. For example, you see courses being developed where the students study online at home during the year, and in the summertime, when the colleges and the universities and the schools are empty, they now offer courses with a face-to-face element. So better use of space as well. Of course, another reason is interest and motivation. And finally, we've always got to remember that each type of learning, or each use of either what I call face-to-face learning or digital, even face-to-face can involve digital, of course, but let's keep the definitions very simple. Each element has unique affordances. One of the things I was talking about yesterday, and I want to make a point, and something I'm becoming more and more interested in, is that we've got to be careful when we're looking at technology. There is a tendency to always talk about the unique affordances of a technology. Oh, it can do this and it can do that. But sometimes we forget the affordances that already exist in what we're doing in the classroom. So the affordances of working in pairs, of working in groups, of working with the teacher, of using a whiteboard. I'll give you a couple of examples. I often felt, for example, that there was a lot of focus on the affordances of an interactive whiteboard. But what about the affordances of just having a whiteboard, where you can have 4 or 5 students run up to the screen and write on the board, or you can divide the board up very quickly and have different parts where you've got your vocabulary, your grammar, etc. So we sometimes overemphasize the affordances in technology and forget the affordances that exist in the technologies that we're already using. For example, books. I simply cannot get used to reading on a Kindle. I can do it when it's very quick and it's a short article, but I can't get away from the fabulous affordances of a book that I carry, that I take notes on, that I can mark the page, that I can flick it open very quickly. And I think, again, that's another example of where we over-exaggerate sometimes the affordances of the technology and forget the affordances of the non-technological alternative, and we've just got to make sure that we keep a balance between those 2 things. So let's get down now to start to actually look at the technology a little bit, okay? And I want to try to come back to this key point that I'm making. It's all about the organization. If you're going to have a blended course, you want to make sure that your students know where all the content is. If you've done a class in week 1 and then you want the students to go online in week 1 and do an activity, well, where is that content going to be? We need a central location. We need a repository, a central place where the students will find the content. So when you blend your learning, and when I create blended courses, and I'm thinking now about the digital aspect of those blended courses. When I create blended courses, what I'm thinking about really is 2 things. 1, the content that I'm going to put in the course. And 2, where I'm going to keep all that content. So there's 2 key aspects to sort of developing blended learning and making sure it works effectively. And that central location is absolutely vital. Now, when it comes to central locations, what I call central repositories, virtual learning environments. There is all sorts of virtual learning environments around. Moodle, Schoology, Blackboard, Edmodo, It's Learning. Loads of them, and I've worked with all of those and others as well. So, just coming back to the slide before again, when we talk about these what I call virtual learning environments, central locations, central repositories. Basically, they are a place to store the learning content. We need to produce the learning content or find the learning content and then store it in a central location. Now, one of the things about tools like Moodle, and to a degree Blackboard, in fact all of these to some degree, is as well as being a central location, they also offer us opportunities to produce content. They try to do both. So Moodle is a good central location, but it also tries to help you to produce the learning content. So you've got chat, you've got forums, you've got quizzes, etc. So often that's why you find that tools like Moodle become a little bit confusing, because they're very good central repositories, but they also offer tools to add and produce content. So something like Moodle is really good on a big course where you've got a lot of content that you want to work with, or where you're teaching fully online. But when you're doing a blended learning course in ELT, sometimes, because I like Moodle, but sometimes it can be a bit too cumbersome, a bit too big for the job. And one thing that I found is that that Edmodo works really well. I do a lot of training on my website. There's something like 1,000 teachers a day visiting teachertrainingvideos.com, and many of them get back to me to say, yeah, Edmodo's great. So let me just talk you through Edmodo, and then I'm going to show you some examples of why Edmodo is so useful, okay? And at the end of this presentation today, I'm also going to give you a password to come on to Edmodo immediately, and there will be some things for you to do on there if you want to try them. Edmodo means all your content is in one place. So you can create an account as a teacher, and then you can create as many classes as you want. And for each, well, they call them groups actually. So each group you create, you share the code for that group with your students, they log in, and then they can access all your content. So for every class I set up, or every group I set up, I have a login code automatically produced by Edmodo. I simply share that with my students, they can log in, they can find all the content. In Edmodo, it has a kind of Facebook way of delivering. And so collaboration and sharing and discussion is the central point. Students find it very easy to use. And they can immediately come on and find the videos, or find the links, or find the questions that you've put there. So it's a great place for organizing your content. You can also create folders. So you can have week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. And inside those folders, you can have all the learning content for that week for your students. So great for that. One of the other things is that you can track the students. So when your students log in and they reply to your questions, or they post their own video or post their own pictures, then you simply can track all that and see, well, which students have done which students have answered the question. Edmodo tracks the activity of students. You can also control your students, and what I mean by that is that if you're worried about them writing something that you don't like, that's inappropriate, you can moderate the posts so that nothing will appear on the screen until you, the teacher, have agreed to it. So there's lots of control. You can edit students' posts, you can leave comments on students' posts, etc. One of the great things about Edmodo is that when you create a quiz or you create an assignment, each time the students do those quizzes or the assignments, all that information is stored by Edmodo. So you can open up and quickly see which students did the quiz, what marks they got. And exactly the same with assignments. You can do assignments, open them up, give the feedback to the students, give them a mark, and that is all automatically put in the record system. That makes life really easy in terms of you organizing a blended learning course, being able to track everything that the students do in the blend. Now, one thing about Edmodo is it's not something that I use a lot in the class. It's very much about the part that the students do at home. I don't bring Edmodo into my classes, and my students are working together in groups and pairs and doing activities in the class. I don't tend to use a lot of technology in the lesson. It's more about what I can get the students to do at home and how I'm going to blend the face-to-face in-class work with the Edmodo that makes the use of Edmodo outside of class. It's a fabulous tool, and I'm saying that really not just from me, that is my experience, and I've used it many times, but also because of teachers. Here you can see I've just opened up a class. On the left-hand side here you can see all my different groups that I've created, and I've opened up a group here called Bristol. And we can see then where we can share the content. As you can see, that's very much like Facebook. You've got this kind of central location where you can put notes and share links and library content, etc. You can do assignments, you can do quizzes, you can do polls. Notice you've got the group code. So every single class you create has got a group code, so that you give that group code to your students. They can access the Edmodo room, and then they can, of course, access the content as well. So that's really, really useful as well, the group code. One of the good things about the group code as well is that when the students log in, so if you're in a class, 10 students log in, you know they're logged in, you lock the room. And that means those 10 students, yes, they can always log in again, but no one else. So it's very good in terms of security as well. Now, I think it's time to start to have a quick look at Edmodo. I know that some of you might not be able to watch these videos. So what I'm going to what I know, and Sean has already mentioned this, is, Sean, if we could start the first video, a quick tour of Edmodo, is that remember, this video will come out in the recording. So please, if you can't watch the video now, this is a quick introduction to Edmodo. Remember that when you receive the recording, you will be able to watch the video. So this first video that I'm going to show you is a quick tour of what Edmodo is. So we're just going to have a quick look at Edmodo, how you can set up a class, and basically start. Okay, so the first thing, and I just want to repeat, I know that some of you are not able to watch the videos because it might be the country you're in or for various settings or the device that you're using. Please remember that when Sean sends you the recording in a couple of days, in the recording you can watch the videos. So just keep that in mind. As I said to you, then you can create a class, or they call it a group. You can create as many groups as you want. For each group, you've got a passcode. When the students come in and begin to answer your questions, or do your assignments, or do your quizzes, or do your polls, or watch the videos, everything that you share on Edmodo, and it's a pretty easy tool to use. And remember, it's free. One of the great things is that you can track the students. You can look at individual students and see what activity they've done, how many questions have they answered, what discussions have they contributed to. So it's very easy as the teacher to be able to track and control all the activity of the students in one place. Edmodo takes a little bit of learning to get used to, but once you get used to it, you really find that that ability to organize everything in one place for your blended courses really makes life easy. And so many teachers that I talk to say, Russell, that really changed my teaching and learning. I literally have taught thousands of teachers to use Edmodo. Simply on online courses that I've run, I've taught literally hundreds of students in that way, teachers in that way, as well as going over to different countries and doing training. So let's look at the tracking facility now. Sean, if we could play the second video. As I said, what's so powerful about the tracking is this ability that you have to just choose a student and then look directly at what posts they've added and what things they've replied to. You are able to track your students. You're even able, if a student, for example, is doing very well, when you're tracking them, if you think, oh, this student's made a lot of effort and added a lot of content, then you can even provide a badge for that student to say that he's been a good student or a hard worker, etc. So I really think that, Edmodo as a tool, though initially it does take quite a long time to learn, it does require a little bit of work on your part. At the end, I will be sharing a link with you that will allow you, or will give you some videos that you can watch where I teach you how to use Edmodo as well. So hopefully, right, here we come now with the second one, which looks at tracking students. Great. So Sean, if we could perhaps play the third video then on quiz information and why it's starting, I'll start talking. One of the other things about Edmodo is that you can create quizzes. The quizzes can be automatically corrected by Edmodo, and again, all their marks can be tracked. Okay, great. I saw someone making a comment there that Edmodo is similar to Socrative. Socrative tracks obviously the students' work definitely, but they're very different tools. Socrative is a poll-making, quiz-making tool. This is a virtual learning environment. You can create quizzes, you can create assignments, you can do polls, you can have discussions, you can create folders. It's very, very different. Socrative is great, I love it, but it's a slightly different type of tool. You know, Edmodo is a virtual learning environment. It really is about that central location where you can have all your files, all your videos, create quizzes, create assignments, etc. And that's the power of it. And remember, you can link out to other things. What I mean by that is, if you've got a video from YouTube and you want to play it, you can share it in Edmodo. If you've got a podcast that you've created, you can share it in Edmodo. So it's really, as I've said, organization. Blended learning is about organization, and Edmodo can be really easily used as a central location for organizing your blended learning. And remember, it's free. That's one of the really special things about it. Now, my favorite tool on Edmodo is the assignment function. It allows me to create an assignment and for the students then to come on and do the assignment, and it's personal, so it's not shared publicly. The students do the assignment. My assignments can include videos, they can include files, anything I want the students to watch. So I can create an assignment, and then when the students do the assignment, I can come in after, look and see who's done the assignment, who hasn't done the assignment, and then I can give them feedback. I can give them individualized feedback about their assignment. So I can say, yeah, very well done, 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10, so I can give them feedback. I can give them a lot of feedback if I want to, and I can even set an assignment, the students do that assignment, and then perhaps in the feedback I can say, well, this is very, very good, but you need to look at this, and I can recommend a file that I want them to look at or a video I want them to watch. So assignments are really powerful because they become very, very kind of what we call dialogic. When we talk about assignments and feedback, giving feedback to students, it's important that assessment is dialogic. Let's have a look. Okay, so we've just looked there at how we can use assignments with students. I can see some of the questions coming through on the screen. I think I'm going to leave them to the end. I've noted a few down. I know that Sean is taking notes of all your assignment, all your questions. So I've given you a quick tour of Edmodo there. So it's a great tool for blended learning. Of course, it doesn't have to be the only tool. It might be Schoology that you like. It might be It's Learning. There are lots of them around. Just personally, I've been very pleased with Edmodo, very pleased with the security, very pleased with the tracking, and very pleased with the reliability. Remember, I'm going all in many different places around the world and using Edmodo, doing training with it, and it's never let me down. It really has been a very reliable and useful tool, and that's one of the reasons why I'm pointing it out. And at the heart of everything I'm trying to say to you today is organization. The reason I like Edmodo is it helps to organize your blended learning. Now, I want to come back to a part, an example that an essential thing that we said at the beginning of the course, and try to demonstrate, now that you've seen Edmodo, a little bit about what I mean. Blended learning is about the sum of all the parts, the whole actually being bigger. In other words, the way the parts combine helps develop learning in our students. It's not isolated bits of work, study in the class, then do something different at home. No, they're integrated and linked together. And let me try to give you just a couple of simple examples when you're working with things like Moodle or Edmodo, what I mean by that. Let's imagine that in the classroom, let's imagine that on Edmodo, you've set up a discussion. The students have watched a video. Perhaps it's a video where a student is doing a presentation. And then students then have to answer some questions related to that video. So that's the discussion part. Then what you do is perhaps either the teacher or one of the students reads all of the discussion and summarizes it and presents that in the class. So there's a link between what the students did at home and what the students do in the classroom. So you're building the learning. It's not as if there's isolated activities. Rather, it's all integrated. For example, you might have a discussion at home that asks the students to go onto Edmodo and talk about what we need to do about pollution in our cities. And students put all their different ideas up about stopping cars, about using perhaps electric buses, etc., etc. Make more cycle lanes, greater use of bicycles, etc. Then you perhaps ask a group of students or one particular student to take that discussion and summarize it. That student comes into the class and presents the summary of the discussion. And then from that, the students work in groups and plan an essay based on the ideas. So again, it's not isolated bits of learning, rather it's integrated. The blend is in the integration of the content that was first created through the discussion, that was then summarized, then presented to the students, and then used as the basis for an essay. So this is what I mean by the different parts linking together, and that is absolutely essential. And that is the way for blended learning to become effective. And one of the things that we need to consider then is how big our courses are going to be. One danger is that we end up putting so much content into our courses that we end up overwhelming our students, and then blended learning can become counterproductive because it doesn't really help our students. It can often put them off and demotivate them. Now, I just want to jump back a little bit to a couple of points. One of them was, I was saying to you earlier that we've got a central location where we keep the content, Moodle, Edmodo, Schoology, blah, blah, blah. And then we have all these different things where we make content that we're going to share in Edmodo, make a podcast and share it on Edmodo. Find some videos on YouTube and share them on Edmodo. Find an interesting article or an interesting blog and share it in Edmodo. Okay, so there's two parts to the blend, the central repository where we organize the learning and the learning content itself. Now, when it comes to learning content, there really, for me, is just one tool that I've really made a lot of use of. When we think about learning content, we can either find the learning content, and I'm doing a lot of work recently now on how we find good learning content. How do we find videos? I've been trawling the internet and looking at alternatives to YouTube, for example, different places where I can find video and video content to use with my students. But when we're producing material for a blended learning course, we either find the material or we make it. And then we put all that material in a central location, like Edmodo. Now, what I want to focus today is one of the tools that I use for making my own material. And I know some of you know about my work. I know some of you are followers of my website. And those of you that know me and know my work and know teachertrainingvideos.com will know that I am completely mad about screencasting and screen capture. That is the ability to record the screen of your computer and to turn it into a video. So you can open something on your screen, mark it out, and record yourself talking, and then save that as a video. And I'm going to demo it in a minute. For me, and I know that lots of people are going to disagree with me, but for me, it is the most useful piece of technology that I've ever come across. And it's something that I'm sure Sean, who's known me for a long time, knows that I've been talking about screen capture since about 2006, so nearly 10 years now. And I've been running teachertrainingvideos.com that long. Screen capture for me is simply the most powerful technology for that the teacher can get their hands on it and do really a lot of very powerful things with it. Other people will find other technologies useful, but I really am a fan of screen capture. So when we're looking at producing content, it's such a useful technology to use. It allows us, and let me just explain, a very simple technology that we click on, and it allows us to record the screen of our computer as if we had a camera pointing at it. So we could open up a PowerPoint presentation and record ourselves talking over it. We could open up a grammar description, turn on screen capture, and then talk our way through it and save that as a video. We might open up a table with some information and open up the screen capture and then record ourselves talking over it. We might even open up a student's work and record ourselves talking over it. We can do all sorts of things with screen capture technology. As I said, it's one of the most versatile technologies. And when you go to YouTube and you watch Khan Academy, or you watch many videos, how-to videos, or videos with explanations, they are all using screen capture technology. If you look at the flipped classroom, if you look at lots of MOOCs, most of those are producing their content using screen capture technology. So what I want to do now is to actually show you, Sean, if we could play the last video on using screen capture. Now, I'm going to show you a technology called Snagit. Snagit is my favorite technology, but there are other ones we'll look at and talk about after. Okay, right. So we you've just seen how easy it is to make a video, and remember that could be a video of you talking over a PowerPoint. It could be a video of you with a little mini grammar lesson on the screen. You can almost record yourself talking over anything and turn that into a video. You can close the window, open something out. All the videos on my website are used using screen capture. They're all created that way. So it really is one of the biggest technologies and one of the technologies that's most used in teaching and learning. Now I want to talk a little bit about screencasting tools. And I think I can kind of vouch from a position of quite a lot of knowledge, because I was actually involved in the piloting of Jing, and I've noticed that some people have mentioned Jing. And I used Jing for many years. It was the tool that I used, and it's free. But Jing is very reduced. And I began to use screen capture so much that I realized it was worth me paying for something. So Jing is free, and you can use Jing, and you can save videos online. You can't save them on your computer. You also have a technology called Screencast-O-Matic. That's another technology that a lot of teachers like. I'm not here to say which is the best tool. I'm just talking about my own personal preference. For a long time I used Jing. However, about 2 years ago I started to shift over to Snagit, because Snagit allows me to create longer videos. It allows me to save the videos on my computer immediately without any compression or anything. And it also allows me to do some basic editing. and I've been really pleased with Snagit. Now I know Snagit costs you $30, but it's £20. It's a technology then you've got forever. It really is worth spending that money. You can go onto their website and look for Snagit educational version, and I think it's $29 or $30. Obviously, for some of you, that's a lot of money and you're not going to want to do it. Start with Jing, start with Screencast-O-Matic, get used to using the technologies, and decide if you need to use something better. I'm only telling you what I've done. Now, if you're working at a bigger level and you're doing things more professionally, then you're going to use Camtasia, which is much more sophisticated, and it allows you to do very sophisticated editing, to put hotspots on the screen, to create quizzes, to have call-outs, to have markers, etc., have beginning of titles, etc., and even subtitles. You can do a lot more with Camtasia. So if you're looking to perhaps flip your classes at an institutional level, so bigger, then Camtasia is a fabulous tool, and at that level you do need to spend money, of course. You make the decision. Some of you would perhaps like to put in the window other technologies that you have used. I'm just saying that me nowadays, I use Snagit. Before I used Jing, now I use Snagit, and of course I use Camtasia as well, because the videos on teachertrainingvideos.com are all made using Camtasia. My shorter videos, like the ones I did with you today that you've watched, they were all done using Snagit. Okay, just to make one thing clear about Snagit is that it's $30 one time if you buy it from TechSmith. So you make the decision. The technology is there, and there are many other ones. You can go on the internet, just write screen capture technology. Fantastic tool. I can't explain to you how often I use the technology. If I said to you and I saw that someone else mentioning that they use both Snagit and Camtasia, I use that technology every single day that I'm working. It's that common. On feedback from my students, sometimes when I'm communicating with other people and I want to talk about them or show them something on a website, I simply make a video of me doing it and then I send them the video. So useful. So let's come to our conclusions. We're coming to the end now, and hopefully there'll be time for a few questions at the end. First of all, lots of different blends, lots of different ways of blending. The key thing is the relationship that you develop between the blended digital elements and the face-to-face elements. It's how you use those two together that for me is key. And it's about using the affordances of both. It's about looking realistically at a technology and what affordances it offers, but also remembering the affordances of things that are non-technical, like the books we love using, like the whiteboard that we love using in the class, like the face-to-face element of teaching. Recently, I was at a presentation at IATEFL with a brilliant presentation from Dr. Eddie Moran, and he analyzed the flipped classroom. And he said, is a flipped lecture on the video as good as being in the class? And the student said, no, it isn't. It's good, but it's not as good as being in the class with the students, because we like sitting in the same room and we can see your face, etc. So this is what I mean about really thinking about the affordances of the non-technical side of some of the things that we do. And we do tend to emphasize sometimes the technology. Face-to-face has got lots going for it, and the social element of being in a class with other students, laughing together, making comments, looking at the teacher and the teacher themselves teaching the class and seeing the students' reactions and knowing if they've understood or they haven't. There's a lot of power in that, and sometimes we forget that. I think technology is great. It's got lots of affordances, but we've got to always be realistic about when it works and when it doesn't, or what it offers that's better than something else. That's absolutely key. At the heart of everything I've said today, though, is that really you've got to be organized. Don't make your courses grow and grow and grow and grow. Keep them realistic. Think carefully about that whole. Think carefully about what you're trying to achieve. An Edmodo is a possibility. I just wanted to demonstrate it as a possibility and also show you how you can create the content that might go into Edmodo using screen capture, which, as most people know who know me, is the tool that I absolutely adore and that I use the most. That was the points I was trying to make today. That's the book I'm suggesting. I'm going to share a link to it in a moment. I didn't write anything in that book, but it's a book I absolutely love. It's got case studies of different teachers and groups of organizations around the world who have blended their learning in English language teaching, and it's a great book. I'm also going to recommend the following, and that is, apart from these links are available to the students in the handout. So a great book from the British Council, but you've also got how to use Edmodo, a set of videos from me showing you, it's a screen capture showing you how to use Edmodo, another set of videos that show you how to use Snagit, and then a third set of videos that show you how to search for images on the internet that are copyright free, and also to search for images of a certain size. A lot of teachers don't realize you can do this. You have a special tool in Google that allows you to search for images of a certain size, and that can be really useful because you don't want to be loading up 3 megabyte images into Edmodo. It's going to slow the whole process down. That link there, it's called Blended Models, is 6 models. It's just a short article about different models of blended learning. I wanted to make the point that blended learning, there's many different models. And then last of all, I've mentioned a book, Technology Enhanced Language Learning. That book's from OUP. No one twisted my arm to recommend a book from OUP, but I have recently read that book, or I'd say recently, about a year ago, and I've recommended it on a few of my courses. I think it's a nice book because it kind of balances the theory and some research, and I've really enjoyed reading that book and found it very, very useful. So there's a few references for you. The last thing is, please come to teachertrainingvideos.com. I saw there's about 157 of you online, so it might mean that I'm going to get a few more followers. The numbers on that website are really growing now. They're really starting to grow. They're getting to beyond 1,000 people a day visiting the website. Lots of free videos on there that show you how to use these technologies. There's a newsletter on there that you can sign up to. I think there's about 26,000 people signed up to that newsletter. Please join that, and of course you can follow me on Twitter. Just before we finish, just to say, Sean, fantastic again. I know we're going to deal with questions, Sean, but well done again with playing the videos and everything. That really made life easy for me. Perhaps now you could just throw out some of the questions,
quite a
Sean.
Few, so I hope you're sitting comfortably.
I should deal with.
I knew that I threw you about that last slide. Just to remind everybody, in the slide that we will send you on this page, these will be the proper links rather than that. I know, so you'll get the links from that. Anyway, right, questions. In this last slide, Russell, in your conclusion slide, could you define what you mean by the word affordances?
Yeah, lovely, and it's very true, and I was kind of touching on this all the time. When we look at different technologies, we can say, well, this technology offers us these things. It's the affordances, almost the qualities that particular technology has. So we can talk about the affordances of something being the things that we can do with it, the things that it facilitates, the things it helps us with. There tends to be an emphasis on always looking at the affordances of the technological. So saying, well, look at a telephone and look at all the affordances that the telephone has got. And a good example has been interactive whiteboards. A lot of people have talked about the affordances of an interactive whiteboard. Oh, the students can come up and write on the board. You can, project your content onto the board. You can easily jump from the internet to doing something else, etc. And that's fine. But then what they don't do is compare that with the affordances of other alternatives. So if I have a whiteboard, a normal whiteboard, I can have 10 students come to the screen and write on the screen all at the same time. I just give out 10 pens. That is a huge affordance, and that makes a very different, especially as long as you've got a big whiteboard in the class. You can do loads of things with a whiteboard. And in many ways, those affordances are more powerful than some of the things that you can do on interactive whiteboard. So it's really what a technology can facilitate. And there is a tendency for us to always emphasize the affordances in the technological and forget the wonderful affordances of things that are non-technological. And the other example I gave is a book. I love the physical thing of having a book, being able to take notes, being able to flip to any page. It's very hard to do that on a Kindle. So we end up focusing too much on the of the affordances of a Kindle and forgetting about the technology that we've already got, and that's what affordances means.
I think the questions kind of fall into three categories. There are a fair few questions about Edmodo, some of which you've probably answered. So I'll just read out the questions as they were given, and then the first one then is, can you create your own videos in Edmodo? You answered that with Snagit, I presume.
Yeah, you can't do that. I mean, it's a repository. You can add in additional apps into Edmodo, but really the great thing about Edmodo is because you can share videos on it, or you can share links on it from anything from the internet. Well, you just use something like Snagit. You make the video and then you share the link to the video on Snagit, or you upload the video if it's not too big into Edmodo. So it's very easy once you learn Edmodo to begin to integrate with other technologies. And if when I do my training courses, the first thing that I do is learn Edmodo really well, and then start to look at what else you can do with it and bring in other technologies. And that is another problem in technology. The tendency is for us always to be looking at the new thing when we don't actually know that technology particularly well, first of all. So my advice to anyone learning Edmodo is learn Edmodo. Learn everything it can do, and then start building on it. And you can build in two ways. You can use external technologies like Snagit, like Audio Boom, or you can look at the apps that you can buy into Edmodo as well. Some of those apps are free as well.
So actually, that is a topic of another question that came up. So the apps, there's a number of apps which are with Edmodo, but you can actually buy other apps to add to it. Is that right?
Yeah, you can, and Sean, I've always avoided that myself, because one of the things, I know you know this, Sean, that I'm beginning to say, again, it's only my opinion, is that, again, I don't want to keep learning loads and loads of technologies because it's just too time consuming. And so what I tend to do now is really focus on the big things. So when I look at Edmodo, I learn that one technology and I can do all those things with it, and I master those first. And then I start extending by saying, right, I'm going to learn now to podcast with Edmodo. And I really look into that. And then maybe I look at Snagit and screen capture and I look at that. So I tend to avoid the apps myself, and I don't want to say that I necessarily know the right way, but just because it becomes too much work for me to keep learning lots of new apps and integrating them into Edmodo. So my general thing is to go for the big tools. But the apps do exist. I've never made use of any of them. I know they've existed.
If a person wanted to add these apps, would they get them from inside Edmodo?
Yeah, they get them from inside Edmodo, and some you pay for, Sean, and some are free.
Okay, the person also asked, are there any special tutorials on them? I think the answer to that is go to teachertrainingvideos.com, yeah?
I think it is, but I don't teach you how to use those apps, I must admit, all right? So you probably best go onto YouTube and look at apps in Edmodo, for example.
Okay. Just a question about video. Can you embed the videos in can you put the videos in assignments? Can they be? You
can put them in assignments. You can put them in quizzes. All right, so you can have a quiz that's got a video first to watch and then a quiz afterwards. Yes, you can put links and embed. You can do both on Edmodo. I tend to have the link there, but you can do both now. You can embed as well the video straight into the page. So yes, and that's one of the great things if you're doing an assignment. Yeah, so right, watch this video, then answer these questions, or listen to this podcast and then answer these questions. So great for listening, or great for discussions. And yes, you can share pictures, audio files, videos, etc.
Somebody asked a question about the quiz function. Does Edmodo give marks? And does the teacher, presumably the teacher has to give the answers to the quiz at some point?
Yeah, well, when you make the quiz, you set the answers. There are 5 question types in Edmodo. 4 of them you can automatically set the answer, so it will automatically give the students the answers immediately. Of course, if you set one type of question, which is called an open-ended question or short answer, then you will need to come in afterwards, click on that question and give the students the feedback. So often I don't use the short answer quiz type. I just do multiple choice, true and false, matching, and gap fill, because all of those are automatically corrected by Edmodo, and I don't want to be continually going online and checking if the students have done the answers. Sometimes if I do want a short answer, then I set that as the quiz type. But yes, Edmodo will correct all of those 4 quiz types for you automatically and put the answers in the database so you can look and see exactly what the students got and what answers they got right and wrong, etc.
Last question on Edmodo before we change categories. Can the students track each other? You mentioned, obviously, you can track the students, but can the students track each other?
Yeah, these are great questions, Sean, all of them, really excellent questions. The answer is no, okay? Everything that you do in terms of, obviously a student can look through the wall and see what other students have put, of course, because the wall is the kind of shared area, but they don't have access to the tracking facility. They can't click on a student's name and click and see how many things they replied to or how many things they've posted. All the student can do is look on the wall and look down and see the activity that's taken place. And remember, if you're worried about a student writing on the wall, I've never had this because, of course, you know who the students are because they're all logged in, but you can actually control it and say, I'm going to moderate the posts. That means that a student's post will not be available on the screen until you have checked it and said, yes, okay, then it will appear. You can also delete a post immediately or come in and edit a post. So you've always got all those kind of levels of control if you need them.
Okay, let's change to a different type of question. Darina asked, how successful does Russell find the blend working, i.e. the ratio of students completing the online versus turning up for the face-to-face?
Yeah, it's a great.
More likely to do one or both?
Yeah, I mean it's a great question, and it is. And I don't want to make the point that I've worked out the answer to that. I haven't. I will say a couple of things about it though, in terms of getting better, and that is it's about integrating the two things together. In other words, if you're using Edmodo with your students to do perhaps activities that they're going to do at home, you need to bring that into the class as well. You can't just ignore it in the classroom. You know, you need to open up the screen and show them and say, oh, look, this has been a really good post from this student, or this week the best post was this, or here's a summary. You need to be linking the classroom activities and Edmodo together. That's what blended learning is about anyway. And it's only through doing that that the students will then start to think, well, yeah, I've got to do this. It's an important part. It is an integral part of the course. What I've done, and I'm not denying this in the past, is tend to put a lot of stuff online, particularly on Moodle when I was teaching English for academic purposes when I was at Westminster, but I wouldn't really be checking it or referring to it. It wasn't an integrated part of the course. It was just additional material that I was putting online. And I think that's where the problem starts. That's why really, if you was to look at the sort of stuff that I do at the moment, you would be amazed how little material I put in my online course in the blend, in the digital part. It's only the things that I'm definitely going to use. So it's really cut down, but it all links together much tightly. And it's then that you're going to get the students working with the two. You know, what some of the early research seems to be just suggesting is that blended learning can become kind of counterproductive if we overwhelm the students with too much content. We want them to open up the Edmodo and go to the folders, see the real specific content that they need to interact with, and that's enough. We don't need loads and loads of extra links and stuff that they might want to use. Or if you're going to do that, clearly mark that it's additional material. So that's the key, is integrating and linking the two parts together.
You've kind of answered this, but a number of people had the same kind of questions. So I'll just for the sake of making sure their questions have heard. I mean, you talked there about the getting people into the face-to-face versus the blend. But how do you actually shift the mindset of students who really don't know this concept, or even are digitally illiterate in a sense? You've got Gary, you've got Mohammed, you've got Annabelle, all asking questions on this line. If the students have never been down this blended route, how do you actually persuade them to do it?
Very interesting. I'm not saying it's not. It's very difficult. I think, at the beginning, it's funny because I was kind of writing an article about this today. I'm writing as I said, for secondary education here in the UK, and I was talking about that hand-holding part of it. And I was saying that, for example, one thing is it's got to be done in a kind of small way. You might get your students to go, obviously, they've got to have access to the internet. That's a factor as well. There's no doubt about it. But when you do it, don't overwhelm them. you know, week one might be a very simple activity, like you've written a question with no video and no anything else to look at, but simply a question and the students write their answer. So something really small. You build them up. You do it bit by bit. You use it for socialization. If you look at, for example, the work of Gilly Salmon, and she talks about at the beginning doing activities that get the students to kind of link together and to share ideas, and you keep it very simple. And it's something that builds up and the students get more and more used to. It's not an easy thing to do, but we've got to think about bringing that aspect into teaching and learning to some degree, because that is the world that the students are going to go out into. We've got to understand that more and more jobs are now involving the use of technology. So if we're completely away from technology in our teaching and learning environments, then of course the students are going to be in for a real shock when they go out into the big wide world, where they're going to be using Google Docs, where they might be working collaboratively on things to perhaps work on a wiki, where they might be using the technology like this for webinars and for presentations, where they might be using PowerPoint, etc., etc. So we have got to kind of introduce it into our teaching and learning. Of course, we've got to make sure that it's effective when we do, and no one's saying that we need to go the complete opposite, and I'm not trying to make that argument. You know, the teacher's got a great place in teaching and learning, but we have got to try to match the skills that we're giving to our students to some degree with the skills that with the companies and industries and employers want. So bit by bit, small steps, persevere, don't give up. If things don't work, do it again. If you set up an activity and only 2 or 3 students go on Edmodo and answer the questions, highlight them. Say, "We're very good, look at these students." Make a point of making sure that they know that it's a part of the course, and slowly students will get involved.
Great advice. I also like what Alison has just written in the chat box. Actually, she should make sure they have marks attributed to going on the course. So they have to do it in order to get marks.
Yep, and that's great.
True, isn't it?
Alison, that's such a great point, and it's true even in assessments and things, that it's part of the evaluation of the students. What, you know, how did they activate? How much did they work with the on the online element on the Edmodo? Remember, you can track that for the students, so that's a great point.
I think we have time for one more question, which is a really interesting question, but one you might not be able to answer. It's from, I think it's Jose, who is clearly very techno-savvy, judging by the conversations he was having in the chat box. And his question to you is this. Do you have any ideas for blended further research?
I mean, yeah, I mean, lots of them. Yes, I think that's, you know, the flipped classroom. Just give you a couple of examples of things I've been tutoring students on. Just had a student working in Colombia. We've been looking at the flipped classroom and looking at the cultural change from the student's point of view. How do they feel about the shift? Suddenly they're expected to watch the videos and prepare before the class. So another thing, so research into the whole cultural change. Another thing in the flipped classroom is this research that Eddie Moran has just done, the one that I said to you, which will actually be on my website soon, where Eddie was looking at the aspects of the flipped classroom and saying, well, we've got 3 key parts. He used a framework that analyzed the flipped classroom, and what he noticed is that where it's lacking is in the social aspect. So trying to learn, for example, what is going on in the flipped classroom, what do we gain from the flipped classroom, what do we lose from it, research into that area is also really useful. Research into the steps that we need to take to bring blended learning to the students. How do we take them through the process of getting them to get more involved in blended learning? How do we train the teachers in that? There are so many things that could be researched around blended learning. It really is, you know, a key area where we need to understand a lot more about what's going on. We need to learn in the blended learning, what do the students do at home? How do they work with the videos? You know, we don't know enough about a lot of these things. We set up these blended learning courses, but we don't actually know what the students are doing. Are they connecting with other students, for example, and then doing the activities? Are they working in isolation? Do they get frustrated? Do they find that there are so many things that you could, you could look into? If that particular person wants to email me, Sean, then I'd be very happy, since I, tutor on master's degree programs, to talk to them about that.
Do they have your email? I can't remember. They've got your Twitter address, haven't they?
I can put my email in the window. It's a very easy one. It's russellstannard@ gmail.com. And you can always go to my website and it says Contact Russell, and you just click on there anyway. Just go on teachertrainingvideos.com and click on Contact Russell and send me an email.
Our time is coming to an end, Russell, so would you like to draw your webinar to a conclusion?
Yes, you know, one final point I'm going to make is the same point I made yesterday, is be brave about technology. You know, please don't get the impression that everything's gone smoothly for me. It hasn't. I've got to this point because I've taken risks, and I actually feel that we have to be a bit more risk-taking in our classes these days. Life and the way we prepare students for working life, perhaps it needs to change a bit. We can't expect everything to go so smoothly and so perfectly, because that's not the way that the real world is functioning at the moment. It's all about dealing with all the challenges that come up, and perhaps we need to bring that into the classroom a little bit more. So taking a few risks as a teacher and being prepared for things perhaps to go a little bit wrong or be a bit frustrated at the beginning, because it's through doing that that eventually you'll get to a point where you think, wow, this is really working. That's a key point I'd like to make.
Just before I let you go, you alluded to a code for an Edmodo site, but I don't think you've given them it.
Oh yes, and thank you for reminding me, Sean. And let me just put this in. If you'd like to go on, it's all ready. So thanks, Sean, for that. And I'm just going to paste it in now. If you sign up to Edmodo now, log in as a student. Do not put your email address though. And please, when you do that, can you just add that code in? All you need to do, 88S6YB. I don't know, Sean, if we can put that on the screen somewhere. Okay, sign up to Edmodo as a student. Please do not put your email address in though, all right, because otherwise you won't be able to sign in later as a teacher. So sign up to Edmodo as a student using that class code, and you can come into an Edmodo course that I've already set up and play around and do a quiz and do an assignment and write a few things on the chat window just to get a bit of a feeling of what it's like to work in Edmodo. Okay, very easy to sign up, and I should have just, if I just quickly jump back just to point out that on the screen, that is how you sign in. First name, last name, group code, that's where you put the group code, and I'll paste it in again. Okay, put a username that you have to have your own unique username, like Russell19551955 is my one. Please don't put your email, otherwise you won't be able to create another account as a teacher. And then just put a password for yourself. 12345 will do. Sign up. It'll bring you into my room, as long as you put the group code as my group code, and you'll be able to play around with Edmodo and give it a try. I hope that helps, and I'll paste that. There it is in the chat window one more time. Sean, a huge great thank you for all your help. That was great.
No problem at all. As you can see, everybody is giving you lots of praise and thanks from it. If you did join us late, or you missed something or you want to go back and remember, we have been recording the webinar. So in fact, I shall